Great. Good morning, everybody. My apologies. I have to re-record this webinar. As many of you who were on the original webinar know, we had some technical difficulties. But I do want to welcome everyone to our first webinar of our volunteer management webinar series. We had 58 people register for this webinar, so thank you to those who were able to be on the webinar live. I hope you give me another chance next month to redeem myself. But we had all 9 regions of Tennessee represented, which was really great. And most everyone who registered on WebEx are in the aging field, but there may be a couple people who aren't in the aging field as they've gotten information about our webinars from other sources. So just so everyone knows who is listening in, that all of these references are going to be toward our aging programs that we have across Tennessee. And I am only going to be approving registrations 1 month at a time. So if you've gone down the flyer and registered for all 12 webinars for the year, I'm only going to be approving January, and after I get this video posted, I'll be approving for February, and then after February, March, so on and so forth. So I do see that you've registered. I'm just trying to keep everything kind of going smoothly and in order. So before we get started, I just kind of want to do a general disclaimer that I am not an expert in volunteer management. However, I'm fortunate enough to have found volunteer management as my passion, and it's something I want to learn more and more about every day, whether that's from reading the books and articles that I have access to learning from each of you who are on the call as well. So that being said, if you do have any questions and I'm not able to answer them, hopefully someone from another agency who's on these webinars as we grow connections can help. If not, I'll be sure to do the research and follow up with the individual and the group if any questions come up. I do want this to be a community of sorts, to be able to share ideas, best practices, struggles, good news stories, anything that can help everybody achieve the mission and make the lives of older adults better so they can live more independently. So that's kind of my goal for this whole year of this webinar series. Today we are going to focus on volunteer recruitment strategies. This was the most popular topic by far when I asked for suggestions last month. So much so that I've decided I'm going to start to add a recruitment tip every month on each webinar as I find things through my research. So we will have ongoing kind of recruitment conversations throughout the series. So I promise I'm not going to introduce myself every webinar, but I do want to give kind of everyone who I haven't worked with in the past a little introduction on who I am. This is probably where I'm going to insert that recruitment tip of the month, so I won't have to talk about myself all the time. So my name is Sydney Chautreau. I am the Director of Volunteer Services here at the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability. A little bit of background, I have an undergraduate degree in Recreation and Sport Management from Indiana State University and a master's degree in Public Administration from Tennessee State University. And I also have a certificate in nonprofit management from both my undergrad and grad. I have volunteer field experience. I was a volunteer coordinator for the State Health Insurance Assistance Program for 2 years at the Greater Nashville Regional Council, or through the Greater Nashville Area Agency on Aging and Disability. I then was able to move up to the state level here at the Commission on Aging and Disability, where I worked with the SHIP program as well, being the statewide volunteer program coordinator. And now, as of August of 2018, I was promoted up to the Director of Volunteer Services, where I'm working to help all 10 of our statewide programs recruit, retain, recognize, train, kind of anything you all need to help grow our volunteer program. In addition to my volunteer responsibilities, I'm also over the Stay Active and Independent for Life SAIL Fall Prevention Grant that we have through June 30th of 2021. I do have outside volunteer experience, so it is kind of my philosophy that in order to be a good volunteer coordinator or director or manager or whatever your title may be, you also need to be a good volunteer, so you can kind of learn the tricks of the trade from other people. So I'm an avid volunteer for Special Olympics Tennessee. I do a lot of big events across the state for them. I'm on the board of the Tennessee Federation for the Aging, or TFA. I was also on the board for the Tennessee Healthcare Campaign for 6 years, and I still volunteer with them. Anytime I'm free and someone needs some help, I do my best to volunteer as much as I can whenever I have the time. So that's just a little bit about me. So I did live when we were able to do this on Friday. Did ask the attendees to answer a few questions for me, and we tried our new polling service. So obviously we're not going to do that on this recording, but I do have those results for everyone who's interested. So I asked the group, how many years have you worked in volunteer management? And we had a good majority of people who have said, let's see, there are 17 of 33 individuals, 17 of 27 individuals who say they have 2 years or less years working with volunteer management, and then 11 out of 27 have 3 or more years of service. So it's good. We're all kind of different ranges, different mixes. So I hope this webinar series is going to be beneficial for everyone. I also asked everyone kind of what percentage of your job responsibilities is dedicated to volunteer management. And when I say volunteer management, I mean things like recruitment, retention, recognition, training, coordinating, data collection, reporting, all that stuff that kind of goes into the volunteer program. So we had 29 people respond to this, and it looks like a good majority of us have 50% or less of our job description or job responsibilities are for volunteer management, which is the norm. That's a lot of the research shows that volunteer management is more a component of someone's larger position than it is their full dedicated position. However, I am excited for the other side of the spectrum where individuals have over 50% of their job responsibility dedicated to volunteer management. That's exciting to see as we grow our programs. The more time you have dedicated for volunteer management, the more time you have to refine and get your programs kind of more up to par to be able to recruit and retain volunteers. And I know it's not easy, and hopefully throughout this series we'll find little ways that we can help make it easier for you. Another question I asked was, how many volunteers do you currently have in your program? And I prefaced this by saying, you know, just your regional program. So you may be part of the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, or SHIP, and it's a statewide program, but you're just one of the 9 areas. Or nutrition, for example, you're just in one county, or transportation, you're in 1 or 2 counties. So kind of ask you to keep it to your region. So a majority of us, about 21, have 50 or less volunteers, which is good. A majority of us have probably 0 to 10, as you can see, which we're going to work on increasing that. And it could be your individual senior center as well, that you may not need that many volunteers. So as you can see, we have some building to do and growing, which is good. We can always use more help as more programs come along. The last question that I asked that I don't have a chart of results was I asked the individuals on the call to kind of tell me their volunteer story. How'd they get involved? What do you enjoy most, least, stuff like that. As I was going, I'm not going to read all the stories, of course, but a lot of the stories that came in was really interesting, and I love to hear that quite a few people started as a volunteer and now are the director of nutrition or transportation, or their volunteer service had led them into their current position. So I thought that was really interesting and great to see as I was reading through the stories. My personal story, again, just kind of in a nutshell, I would go to my grandmother's retirement community. She lived in an apartment complex, and I would go help her kind of do things around her apartment, and then she would say, you know, go to Ms. Cook's house, go to Ms. Gay's house, and I would go to all of her friends' house and kind of help them with yard work, take out their trash, you know, change their light bulbs, whatever they needed. So I started at about 5 years old, at kind of a young age, being voluntold, as many of us are, to do things, and I never thought that it would evolve into my career, and I'm just so happy that it has. So I give my grandma a lot of credit for where I am today. Now, so with all that being said, now we're going to get into the good stuff. So kind of our agenda today is we're going to look at our volunteer recruitment campaigns. So there's different areas that we have to focus on before we can get to actually the places that we're going to go and recruit people from. So I know that's probably what a lot of you were thinking this webinar was going to be, is just where can I find people and how do I recruit them? I promise we're going to get there, but before that, we need to make sure we have our structure in place. Many of you already have all of these elements in place and everything is working smooth, but I really strongly and highly encourage you, as it is a new year, to look at each of these elements that we're about to discuss and either update them, tweak them, just to see if there's anything you can adjust just slightly to make the program go a little bit more smoothly throughout the year. So we're going to assess our current program. We're going to look at creating or updating our role descriptions. Role descriptions can be called many, many different things, and I'm going to reiterate this throughout the webinar most likely. Some people call them volunteer job descriptions, volunteer position descriptions, role descriptions, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. Job description sounds very employee-employer to me, so I try and take any of that kind of language out of my descriptions, but to each their own. And also, I probably should have done this disclaimer earlier as well. I'm going to give you guys a lot of things to consider. What the research says is best practices, but I have no authority to say you have to change your volunteer program to fit this structure. So anytime you have an idea of, yeah, I want to implement that in our program, be sure you run it by, you know, your supervisor, or if you're a statewide program and you have to talk with someone up here at the Commission on Aging and Disability level, just kind of make sure you do your checks and balances and don't get in trouble for making these changes. Just want to put that out there as well. We're going to talk about general recruitment versus focused recruitment. And lastly, we are going to talk about launching your campaign and where you can find some of the volunteers and how to get their attention. So we're going to start with the assessing the current program, and we're going to go over a checklist. So here are some things that we're going to talk about the next few slides to really prepare for recruiting volunteers. And hopefully, like I said, you already have most, if not all of this in place, and please consider just kind of reviewing, updating, and tweaking throughout the beginning of this year. So first things first, you have to determine your needs. And your needs need to be very specific. So for example, if you say, I need volunteer drivers, perfect. But do you need volunteer drivers on Mondays and Wednesdays? Do you need them every day of the week? Do you need them in certain time slots? Do you need them to be able to travel a certain radius to pick people up? So be very specific in determining what needs you have for your program. What skills does the individual need? Do they need skills? Or does the training that you provide give them the skills that they need to be successful? So maybe you'll need really good interpersonal skills. So you're going to be talking to individuals. Make sure they're okay with talking to people. Make sure they want to do that. They need computer skills. If they need to be able to lift a certain amount of weight as they're going from place to place. They may have a fitness program that they're working with, or they might have heavy materials they need to bring to a health fair. So make sure people know upfront what kind of skills you're looking for. What are your clients' needs? So this could be where you do an assessment of your current clients and see if their needs are being met. And if they're not being met, see if there may be a volunteer component way that you can get those needs met. And also brainstorming with your coworkers or your staff to see what needs they have as well. So brainstorming I have a love-hate relationship with brainstorming. I love it. It's kind of where you can just have word vomit, and anything that comes out, no matter how ludicrous it might sound, at least it's out in the open, and you can see if, okay, that's a little intense, but maybe we can narrow it down and make it more realistic. But really anything goes in brainstorming, and you might be able to find a nugget or two of things that you can really help your clients or your coworkers or the volunteer themselves throughout that session. So really, this is something you should take your time with. It shouldn't be just a day thing. Dedicate some good time to determine the needs of your volunteer program or your program in general. Analyzing your workspace. So as you get volunteers coming in, are they going to be in the office or are they going to be remote? So if they're going to be in your office or your agency space, are they going to have shared space, or do they get their own computer, own desk, own cubicle, own, you know, closed-in office? So do they have the equipment they need? Do they have enough lighting? Do they have a computer? If they're doing some calculations, do they have a calculator? Staplers, paper clips, you know, are they able to use those office supplies that you have for everyone else, or do you need to purchase kind of your own through your budget for those volunteers? Do they need to bring their own stuff? If they have certain manuals that they've been given through training, do you have extra copies at the office, or do they need to bring the training materials that they provided or you provided them to make sure you don't, you know, have multiple uses of the same thing? Do they have access to your break room? Can they have the drinks that are available, or the snacks? So do they have to pay for coffee? Can they get water from the water cooler? Do they need to bring their own? What kind of accommodations do you have for anyone who's coming in who may have recently had a surgery or who have different devices that they need, or they're on crutches or in a wheelchair? Is everything accessible, or do you have different accommodations that you may need to address? If they are working remotely, do they have everything they need at the location? Again, check out their equipment. Do they have a computer if they need one? Do they have their own space, or do they have to be in a community space where all the other, you know, if it's at a senior center, for example, do they have a table in the rec room where everyone's kind of gathering and it's rather loud, or do they have their own kind of more secluded space or private space in the back? And do they have a contact person at the location? So if something happens, do they know who at their facility, whether it's a senior center or a library or assisted living, wherever, or a nursing home, wherever they're at, do they have a contact person that they know where to find them, how to get in touch with them in case something happens? A volunteer liaison. We all need one of these. And most likely, that volunteer liaison is you, or else why are you listening to this webinar, right? It could be different. You could be one of the AAAD directors or assistant directors, and you're over some of the statewide programs, and you have to designate, okay, you are the contact person for the ombudsman, you're for guardianship, you're for SHIP, you're for nutrition, you're for CREVA, whatever it might be. So the volunteer liaison is the person that the volunteer is going to contact if there's any kind of question. Where do I need to be? What time do I need to be there? How do I need to dress? Is there any materials you need me to bring? Things like that. It's also important to keep up the communication if there's ever a change in volunteer liaison. There's a lot of turnover in some of our programs because people find new experiences and new opportunities that they take advantage of, and we hate to see them go, but it's kind of part of the process. So make sure that volunteers are informed before the person leaves, or as soon as you can, I guess I should say. As soon as you're able to, hey, so-and-so is no longer going to be with us effective XYZ day. Going forward, please contact so-and-so with any questions that you have about the program. So that way, you know, if they read the email, great. they understand if they maybe miss that email and they continue to talk to or try and communicate with the old volunteer liaison. There may be some confusion, but you have that documentation that you sent out the new contact for them. This is extremely important to designate a person for volunteers to have that contact with. A recruitment budget. So some of you may have this, some of you may not. I am one of those individuals who needs to be better at budget stuff. So this is one thing I'm personally going to be working on and tweaking and updating at the beginning of this year. So what kind of items do you need? How much money do you need for those items? Are any of these items able to be donated or in kind through your office? What is the actual cost? And then if there's any maybe reasoning behind why you're doing this that you need to share with your supervisor, can go into the additional information. So office supplies, that could most likely, hopefully, fingers crossed, in your organization can be in kind through your agency. That's like your paper clips, staplers, stuff like that. Advertising costs, no matter how you want to advertise your volunteer programs, if you want flyers, posters, print ads, media ads, brochures, whatever you want to develop, would be good to let your supervisor know about how much money you're anticipating that would cost. Printing in general, any kind of promotional items you might want. Travel expenses is something definitely to budget for. So as you're going out and making those presentations to certain groups, are you going to be able to get your mileage reimbursed for all these different things? If you're doing events or trainings that you're allowed to have food, a lot of our federal grants that come for a lot of our programs, they have strict requirements either against having food purchased under the grant, or you have to have so many hours of training before food can be provided. For example, my program, the Stay Active and Independent for Life SAIL program, the grant excludes food at no matter what. So I'm not able to purchase food for any of our trainings that we have across the state. I was able to find a sponsor to do lunch last year, so I have both in kind for one day of the training where they can come sponsor lunch and do a little talk about their service, and then my agency has agreed to pay for lunch for the other day. So a little bit mixture of amount that needs to be budgeted and an in-kind donation. And then any other kind of events that you want to put on. So for example, in the Southwest region in Jackson, Keita Cole did a great volunteer recruitment event that I'm sure she was able to talk with her supervisor and get some money budgeted for. So any kind of events like that, or orientations and things like that, should be budgeted for. You definitely need to get your board and your staff involved, and that includes getting their buy-in. So board members, for a lot of us, board members could mean, for the senior center, you may have a board, or it could be through your county or city government. You could have advisory councils. For the commission in particular, for my example, we have commission members who are kind of like our board of directors. But getting their buy-in for any kind of volunteer recruitment for your programs is really going to be important, because they have connections in the community that you may not have. They could have connections at faith-based organizations or other nonprofits who have similar missions that we can partner with. Depending on your organization, they may approve or deny or ask for you to redo the budget that we just talked about. And they could do a new energy for the project. If you propose that you want to recruit 10 new volunteers for your transportation program, and there's a board member whose mom struggles going to the store and she can't take time off of work to be able to take mom to the store, she might be really behind getting 10 to 15 new volunteers for your transportation program, and she could bring a new, or I should say she or he or she, would bring a new energy to that program, gets you more motivated, and gets a lot of people really excited about any kind of projects going on. Same thing with staff. And when I say staff, I more probably mean your coworkers, or you may have staff and direct reports. But when you do start to recruit volunteers and they come into the office, whether it be for a training or you need some help in the office, things like that, other staff and coworkers that you work with are going to interact with those volunteers. So it's good first to give them a heads up. And then ask them, if you could just say, the random person who's walking around who you may not know why they're in the office, it's probably going to be our volunteer. Just, say, hey, thank you for being here. How are you? Can I get you anything? Just so there's a pleasant, nice working environment as the volunteer comes in, they feel welcome and want to come back and help more. Other staff and coworkers may have needs for your volunteers. So if your volunteer says, I can be in the office for 3 hours on Wednesday, great. You think you have 3 hours of work for them, but your volunteer is very efficient and diligent and they get all the work done in an hour and a half. Well, you don't really have a whole lot for them to do for that other hour and a half. There may be a staff member who needs help with something that the volunteer may be able to go over and assist that person with. So also getting to know your staff and coworkers and if they might need anything from a volunteer. And just really letting the staff and your coworkers know that their voices are being heard. So if for some reason there might be a complaint from the staff person, your volunteer is in the cubicle next to mine and whenever they call someone, they really talk really loud and I'm not able to concentrate all that much on the work I have to do because they're talking so loud. You could talk to the volunteer and say, hey, we've heard that you talk relatively loud on the phone. We're just wondering if you could, tone it down just a little bit, say it nicer than that, of course. And it could be, I talk to a lot of older adults that have a hard time hearing me, so I do need to speak a little bit louder. So it might be, okay, well, we're going to change your work area over here, or let that staff person know, hey, so-and-so is going to be here from this time to this time, just so you know. We've talked to them about their voice being high when they're on the phone and loud, but at the same time they talk to people who are hard of hearing, so it's hard for them to talk quieter and really be able to help the client and see if there's something you can work out with that staff or coworker. So just making sure there's a good environment for everyone, your coworkers and the volunteer, it will go a long way, especially in retention and helping out your fellow coworkers and getting that buy-in. Legal and safety concerns. All of your agencies should have a risk management policy, maybe a handbook that kind of goes over in case of an incident, if something happens, maybe there's an incident report, who to contact if there's any kind of harassments of any kind, what's acceptable and non-acceptable behavior, anything like that. Is typically already put together and defined by your organization's policy. So you might want to talk to your supervisor, or if you have a legal department, they'll probably be the ones who have that risk management manual. I do encourage, if you're able to get permission from your supervisor or any other authority body you have to go through, to do a risk management policy or manual for your particular volunteer program. We had to do this with the SHIP and SMP program, the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, and the Senior Medicare Patrol. Had to do that. It was about a 30-some-odd page document. So there is one already in place for some programs. If we need to share resources, there's no need to reinvent the wheel whatsoever. So if there's anyone who's interested in seeing kind of what those programs have done, let me know and we can share that information. It's really important to have these things in place because it not only protects you as a staff person, it protects your program, your agency, and the volunteer themselves. And it also ensures a safe working environment for everyone. Again, an environment free of harassment and hopefully free of complaints. And if there are any complaints, hopefully this risk management policy will give you some tips and tricks on how to reconcile those concerns. So very important. This will probably be its own presentation all by itself. Screening policies. I'm sure all of you have screening policies in place that are put together by that risk management policy of your agency. But things to definitely have in your screening policy is a volunteer application. As I'm doing my research through the books and articles I'm reading, some researchers have a volunteer application as a separate document to the volunteer questionnaire. I've noticed it's easier to kind of combine the two, so it's whatever's easiest for your program. But, you know, the application is more the general information, your name, your address, your email, your phone number, emergency contact, just so you have that information about your volunteer. You might actually have on the application their date of birth, their race, ethnicity, and their age, maybe to get some demographic information, which is important to have, especially when you're applying for grants and things. The questionnaire portion more refers to what kind of skills do you have, what are your hobbies and interests, what's your education, current or former jobs, your availability, the times that you're able to be a volunteer, things like that. So in my personal experience, I kind of combine the two. That way I have everything in one location instead of trying to find multiple pieces of paper. Again, that's up to you and your program how you want to go ahead and do that. Your volunteer role descriptions or job descriptions or position descriptions, however you want to say those, it's very important to have those in addition to your application. So when you're recruiting someone, here's an application. Also, here's some of the different volunteer opportunities we have and kind of what those responsibilities and duties are, so you can determine which role you might want to play in our volunteer organization. And we're going to talk more in depth about the role description here in a little bit. An interview. It's always good to have an interview with the volunteer to get to know them and actually talk with them. Now, this doesn't have to be formal, like in the picture. They don't need to dress up in a suit and bring their resume, and you know, you don't have all those interview questions like you're trying to get them to get a job by any means. This could just be a simple phone conversation. Hey, we're excited that you're interested in the program. What got your attention? Why are you interested in volunteering for our program? Here's some of the opportunities that we have. What are you interested in doing? Where are you interested in volunteering at? Do you have a location in mind, or is there somewhere that we can help get you set up at? So just actually having that conversation with the individual. It could be face-to-face if you have the time. Hey, let's grab a cup of coffee and talk about the program and how you can be a part of our mission and our goals. And lastly, the background check. I know a majority of our programs have background check requirements. There are some who may not have a background check requirement. For example, my program, the Stay Active and Independent for Life program, there is no background check requirement, so we don't do background checks for our leaders. They have to have certain requirements other than that, like a fitness certification and things like that. But our individuals, while they're working with older adults, the older adults are coming to them. They're not going, into the home, or they're not working with personal sensitive information on individuals necessarily. So that could change. I am a strong advocate for background checks for all volunteers. So I may be working on incorporating that, but I do have a couple steps of individuals that I need to go through to get that in place. But I think background checks are a great way to screen, of course, individuals. If someone says, no, I don't want you to do a background check on me, it's okay to say, I understand that. I don't think that you're a good fit for our program, because we do have that personal sensitive information that we work with. Record keeping. Now this picture shows a filing cabinet. Your record keeping could be paper form, it could be electronic. However you want to keep records is fine. There's no right or wrong answer to how to keep the records. I'm a paper trail person personally, but there's definitely some things that you want to keep in that volunteer file. So you want to have their application for sure. That might be something you want both physically and electronic, make it easier to find their contact information. You want their background check. Make sure everything is clear and good. One of the best practices is redoing background checks at least every 5 years to make sure they're up to date and make sure nothing has happened. Any type of signed documents, You want to make sure you have on file like confidentiality agreements, code of ethics, conflicts of interest, so on and so forth. Make sure you have the signed copy in their file, but also make sure that the volunteer has a copy of what they signed. Any type of training certificate, so you can make sure all of their hours are complete, if they have update, hours that are required. Any type of reports that they've submitted you may want to keep on file. As you're doing reviews of volunteers, I know it sounds very employee-employer, but it is a best practice to do annual evaluations on your volunteers. And these don't have to be formal either. It could just be a conversation. Hey, how's the year gone? Do you enjoy what you're doing for the program? Is there anything you think that we can do better with the program? Anything else you want to maybe try something new next year for the program? Anything like that? Any kind of notes you have on the individual to have in their file? Other things to consider, if you do welcome letters for your program, have those on file. Any type of emails or notes or cards that you have about the volunteer's good work. So every now and then I'll get an email that says, I really enjoy so-and-so. They helped me with all my questions. They were really great to work with. I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate what they've done. So make sure you keep any of those good news stories on files for those individuals, and also share that information with the volunteer. Not only do we appreciate what you're doing, but this client has personally reached out to tell us how awesome you are, and we just want to thank you for that. On the hopefully rare occasion that you have a complaint, and make sure those are on file. We're going to talk in a few months. Is it okay to fire a volunteer or terminate a volunteer? You want to have those documents in place in case you unfortunately have to do something like that. Granted, termination is not the first line of defense. One complaint, you're gone. That's not what we want to advocate for. But you do have to make sure that there's some documentation if there was ever a volunteer that you would ask to leave the program. But hopefully, knock on wood, that doesn't happen for you, and it's a rare, if never, occurrence that you have to deal with. So talking about volunteer role descriptions, and again, like I said, you can call it whatever you want. I like role descriptions. Position descriptions is another one that I've read about mostly. So here are some common elements that you want to have in your volunteer role description. A title, especially for our younger volunteers that may be working on resume building, or even our older volunteers who need some resume credentials. They want a title. It doesn't have to be anything flashy or anything cool, but if they just say, volunteer for SHIP, the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, volunteer counselor or SHIP counselor, something like that. Role or purpose, make sure they know why they're doing what they're doing. Their duties and responsibilities. This is where you can get really transparent and let them know this is exactly what we expect of this position. So there's going to be no surprises come up that says, oh, we also need you to report on a monthly basis. Well, you never told me that. Actually, in the job description, we have it pretty clearly laid out for you. Their supervisor, again, that's probably too harsh of an employee-employer word, but maybe you put your volunteer liaison. So put your name and contact information there. I'm the person, if you have any questions, who you're going to contact. Location and schedule, if there's a specific place that they're going to be, or time frame that you need them. A commitment. So I know for and I don't know for each individual program, but for the SAIL program, for example, it is a commitment of teaching a fitness class 2 to 3 days a week for 1 hour each class for either a 12-week period or continuously for as long as they can. So it could be a short-time commitment or it could be a long-time commitment. The skills that are needed, so they know, okay, if I need computer skills, is this going to be the right position for me? I'm not too computer savvy. I can learn, but if it's going to be really computer heavy, I may not want this volunteer position. Any type of training or support that you provide, so your initial training is going to be provided, and we'll have monthly or quarterly update trainings that you can benefit from throughout. Benefits. They may be able to get mileage reimbursement, or you'll help them with their resume, or something along those lines. So here is an example of a volunteer role description that I've done for our sale leaders. And I have also attached this to the emails that you've received when I posted the video, as well as right before the webinar. So you have this, and you also have kind of a sample template of a volunteer role description. When you're looking at role descriptions, another part you really want to think about and revisit. This is probably the #1 thing. If you don't take anything else away from this webinar, I really want everyone to consider going back to their volunteer role descriptions, really looking them over, really tweaking them to make sure that everything that you wanted to be required of last year is represented this year. So something to consider is, are there any questions that are regularly asked by your volunteers? You had 5 volunteers ask you the same question about the job description that you can answer in this role description. So for example, I apologize, I'm using SAIL a lot. That's kind of my main program right now that I'm focused on. I get asked a lot by potential volunteers, am I going to be reimbursed for classes? Well, we do have 2 ways that a SAIL leader could potentially be reimbursed. So what I need to do is I need to relook at this volunteer job description and maybe add a benefits tab or category that says you may be able to be compensated through reasonable donations or through our partnership with Tivity Health. Just so that's kind of out there and the volunteers know up front that this is a possibility. Do you have a volunteer role description for every single opportunity that you have? So for a senior center, for example, you probably have loads of volunteer opportunities that you can fill. Do you have one volunteer role description that encompasses everything, or do you have individual role descriptions for certain needs? For transportation, there could be some people who say, I'm happy to help someone go to the grocery store, but I really don't want to go to a doctor's office visit that, I might be sitting in the waiting room with the individual, and their appointments might be running late, and I really don't have that much time to sit and wait with them. So you could have a volunteer role description for grocery drivers or doctor drivers or pharmacy drivers and kind of things like that to really focus on what you need, going back to the assessing your programs, and see if you need more drivers that are willing to go to doctor's appointments than to the grocery store. But you have those descriptions to tell those individuals what's expected of them. So general versus focused recruitment. So your general recruitment is really just getting a body count. You may have a huge event like an expo where you just need people to help check in vendors and do tear down and set up and make sure that people who are in attendance have all the goodie bags that they need, or that they're turning in their evaluations at the end, or their bingo cards, or however you do your large scale events. So there's really no particular skill that's needed. There just needs to be, I need 100 volunteers to help with this expo. A lot of those volunteers may be your coworkers and staff. But this also could be something like a big painting project. If you're at the senior center and you have a huge rec room, or the gym needs to be painted, or something along those lines, special events and things like that. So really, all are welcome. We're not going to turn anybody away to help with this general recruitment. You don't want to do general recruitment if you need a specific type of person. If you need someone to do your social media stuff, you don't want to just get anybody who's going to do whatever they want. You want someone who knows the social media landscape, maybe has a marketing background, stuff like that. So most of us, I have a feeling, are going to want to focus on the focused recruitment. So this is really getting to know the W's of your volunteers. So you need to know the who. Who are the types of people you want to recruit for our programs? The what. What are their hobbies, their interests, and their passions? Do their hobbies, interests, and passions line up with our mission? If everything lines up, you're going to have a volunteer for a longer period of time. They're going to enjoy what they do, they're going to know why they're doing it, and they're going to want to do it a lot. Where do they live, work, eat, go to school, attend service, travel, play? Where are you going to be able to find them? Those are the places you're going to find them. If you want just a random example that I just thought about, if you're needing some older adults who are up early in the morning and you need them to be at the center early to help with certain things, look at your local fast food places. I know in my small hometown in Indiana, there's a group of at least 10 guys every morning, 5 a.m., they're at McDonald's eating their coffee and their biscuit. Right there are 10 people I can talk to and see if they're willing to volunteer for something early in the morning after their coffee and biscuit. See if they're willing to come over to the center or do something, maybe not on a daily basis, but maybe on a weekly basis. So thinking of those things outside of the box. When's the best time to reach them? So do you have volunteers who, they're retired now and they want to sleep in, or they're retired now and they still get up early like they're going to work? When's the best time that you can talk to them? You don't want to wake them up. That doesn't make people happy. But you also only are open until 2 o'clock. So you kind of have to, balance that out on when's the best time to get a hold of them. Why would they want to volunteer for us instead of another program? That is a great question. That goes to the passion and their interests and their hobbies to make sure everything kind of coincides and you have a volunteer for life. And then how do you reach these individuals? You'll find a common denominator. As you look at the volunteers that you have in your current program, you're going to find various similarities. You might have a lot of volunteers who go to church every Sunday, or they learned about you from being a client of your program. So you're going to find those common things of why people are with your program and really capitalize on that. Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about the stuff that you all are here for and why you're here. Kind of launching that volunteer recruitment campaign and kind of the best practices and best ways to recruit, the best places to look for individuals. So by far, hands down, without a doubt, the most powerful tool you have is word of mouth. If someone is not going to be asked to volunteer, that's not the right way to say that. So most people say, I don't volunteer for an individual organization because I'm never asked. So the worst thing that someone can say is no. Word of mouth is the least expensive and most cost-effective way of recruitment. So you need ambassadors. You have your volunteers. Your volunteers are going to be the best recruiters for new volunteers because they can tell their story. They can really tell their peers potentially why I volunteer for this organization and why they should too. Board members, again, they have those connections in the community that you may not have. Same thing with staff and coworkers. They may have those connections, and it comes when you ask someone to volunteer, it's good that someone who knows the individual asks them. You don't want to do cold asks. You can do cold asks, but it's better to have that relationship with the individual before you ask to make some kind of volunteer commitment. Looking at speaking venues. So you have your ambassadors, you have 5 people who are willing to go around the community and talk to individuals about volunteering for the program. Go to a place that the volunteer knows and is comfortable. So they may have, they could go to church every Sunday for service, and they might be able to talk to either the whole congregation or maybe an individual ministry. Help the volunteer, board member, or staff with creating talking points for them. Hey, I want you to tell your story, and I want you to, be able to say what you want to say, but also can you hit these 5 key points? Make sure you talk about our mission, make sure you talk about the need in the community, and kind of give them what you would like them to incorporate into their speech. And then, of course, like I've mentioned, they can give their testimonial and share their story. One thing that I wanted to do back when I was with the SHIP program, but I wasn't able to do, that I think in terms of all the reading, this has always come up. And I kind of wonder if anyone who's listening has done this, a volunteer-a-thon. So this is when you ask your current volunteers to bring at least one person, if not two people, to an event. Maybe it's just an orientation or a mixer or just a brief lunch or something like that, who they think would be a good volunteer for your program. And then you're able to, if you have 10 volunteers, everyone brings 2 people, you have 30 people at the event, 10 who are currently volunteers, 20 potential volunteers. You tell them about everything that's going on with your program. You know, you give them something to drink, a little snack. It doesn't have to be, you know, a catered meal by any means, but little finger foods maybe. You talk to them and see if they're interested in volunteering. You give them all the different job descriptions. They go home with an application, and you'll see if maybe you can recruit 5 to 10 from that pool of individuals to volunteer. I think that's a really good way to do it. And there's been, through the research, it's shown to be a pretty effective way to recruit some new volunteers. Your schools and colleges. So this, when I say schools, I don't just mean the higher education schools. Depending on what your requirements are, the age limits, if you have those, you have some students that are in high school who may be in an honor society or something along those lines that are required to do some community service. And I know a lot of people, and I'm one of these people who are like, community service. They're going to be short-term volunteers, kind of the quote-unquote one and done volunteers is kind of what I like to call them, where they come to one event and then you may never see them again. So I was a little skeptical for these individuals, and as I'm reading, if you can get 20 high schoolers who need 20 hours of community service, that's 400 hours that you can get these 20 students to do for you. And there's a lot of stuff you can get done in 400 hours. So I'm starting to come on board with the community service and even some internship stuff that we'll talk about. It's just going to take a lot of planning and coordination to make sure you can get the most bang out of your buck, so to speak. Internships, that's another thing that I'm like, internships are great. I did many internships in school, and they were all extremely beneficial to me. When it comes to me being an internship supervisor, I'm not the best. I'll put that out there. I mean, I'm definitely working on it. That's something I want to improve upon. But I need to be prepared. And I think that's important for all internships, is to, when someone's coming in, you need to have them for, 3 months. That's a long time to plan out to make sure that that person's having a good experience. You don't just want them to sit and do the same thing for 3 months. So you don't want them just to do data. Here's a bunch of paperwork. You're just going to enter data into the system for the next 3 months. They're not going to enjoy that. They're not going to have a good experience. So you want to make sure that you have the time to prepare and give them the experience that they need to want to go into the aging field or whatever field that you're in. But again, 3 months is a long time that you can have someone else help you get so many things done and accomplish so many goals and to your mission and help so many of your clients. So they are good things. It's just, personally, I know I need to get into a different mindset and make it more beneficial for the individual especially, and find ways to make it beneficial for our programs as well. There's also, on college campuses, there's Greek life. You have fraternities and sororities. I was speaking to one of my coworkers on Friday about sorority. They always have community service as well. And we were talking about pledges. I personally was not in a sorority, so I'm not sure exactly how all this works. But wouldn't it be cool if you were able to partner with a fraternity or sorority, and as a requirement of getting into the organization, they're required during their pledging phase, I guess is what it's called, I don't know, to have so many hours of volunteer service for your organization. So if it's transportation, okay, the pledges have to make sure that they do at least 2 drives Or for Meals on Wheels, the pledges have to at least deliver meals once a week for 3 months or whatever it is. So really being able to partner with some Greek life on those college campuses could be beneficial for some of our programs that have the shorter term commitments and maybe not the long-term commitments. Your internships are really for that long-term commitment. Tennessee Promise students, my coworker Amanda, who is the one who told me about the Greek life stuff, also brought to my attention the Tennessee Promise students. So these are individuals who are required to do community service in order to get maybe some discounts to go to school. So they have a lot of hours that are required of them to complete. So again, 20 students that have 40 hours of community service that they have to do can get a lot done for your organization. So something to consider. Definitely, when it comes to schools, there's a lot more planning and preparation that goes into making sure everyone, the organization and the student, has a good experience. Service and social clubs. So we've probably all talked to the Lions, the Kiwanis Club, the Elks Clubs, the VFWs. Everything that these 4 organizations have in common is service above themselves, or service above others. No, service above selves, I believe, is kind of a common thread amongst all 4. So they may have something like, you know, we need to do some community service. Let's do a meals route once a week. And I'm sure we can find 2 or 3 guys or girls from the club who would do this certain meals route. Or we're able to do this really great program, and we can do it 2 days a week at the senior center. So whatever kind of program they have, maybe it's a veterans program, maybe it's a support group of some kind that they could bring to the senior center. So looking at these individuals, clubs, going to them, giving presentations at their monthly meetings to see if you can find anyone who'd be interested in volunteering for the program. These are great resources that we all may not have tapped into just yet. Faith-based organizations. So again, much like our service clubs, their common thread is service to others is really extremely valued for any faith-based organization. They also may have some resources that we don't know about that could expand the services that we provide to our clientele, so we have more resources to share. But the only thing that I've personally noticed with faith-based organizations, and I wish I had more connections in the community with faith-based organizations, it could be difficult to connect with them if you're not already a member of the congregation, or if you don't have someone who you know who's a member of the congregation that can kind of get you in. So this is where your volunteers and staff and board, again, can really come in handy to see if anyone has a connection in their local church or mosque or wherever to try and get in and either speak to the entire congregation or, like I mentioned earlier, speak to maybe a smaller young adult ministry or senior ministry or even the teen ministry if you need some younger volunteers to help out with maybe the moving of certain things. You're moving to a new center, or this room needs to be over here and you need some younger bodies to move the heavy stuff. Media is going to be a great resource for you, and a lot of us are already using these. So public service announcements, these are typically free if you go through a radio station. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get free advertising in prime time, so you might not get your stuff aired during prime traffic rush hour. But you never know. There could be a slot every now and then during a prime time that they just don't have paid advertising that they might put your public service announcement in. So if it's not going to, hopefully it won't take you a whole lot of time. You just do a little script, you go and record, and hopefully they'll be able to put you on the air multiple times, and maybe once or twice you'll get in some of those more highly populated time slots. Featured articles. So there are quite a few people, especially our older adults, that still like to get that paper newspaper, not the online paper, but the paper. And even if it's online, they do that as well. But if you can get a featured article about your program, about a volunteer, that could really help. Oh, here, I know so-and-so who is in the paper and what they're doing for the community, and I think I want to try and get involved more in the community, and they'll start with the program that was featured in the paper. News, TV news segments. I really want to give kudos to Keita Cole at the Southwest Area Agency on Aging and Disability. She did a really great volunteer expo in Jackson last fall. I apologize, I don't remember what month it was. But she had the news crews out there and she was interviewed. And I need to follow up with Keita to see kind of the fruits of all that labor, to see if they had an increase in volunteer recruitment from all that. But all the programs are represented. They had a good group of people come out. So another thing to think about is during Volunteer Appreciation Week, which I believe is the 3rd week in April. I should have looked up those dates. It might be good to be able to bring in some news crews and highlight your program. Maybe you have a luncheon or some kind of volunteer recognition event that the local news station or even the newspaper could do a feature on and really get the program out there to the public. And then the last thing is press releases. So these can go a long way. It can go to the radio station, TV station, newspaper, and you can get exposure in all 3 kind of media outlets, so to speak. And they might contact you. Hey, we saw your press release and we really want to do a feature on you. So the more information you can get out about your program to the most media you can connect with could really help in exposure, especially in the local communities. Your online presence is very important. First and foremost, you have to have everything related to your volunteer recruitment on your website. That is going to be a key way that if you're doing a TV segment or you're doing a feature in the newspaper, you can put your link to your website for more information. They're going to have everything that they need. This is something that I'm working on for our website. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But hopefully here by the end of the month, if someone's interested in any of the 10 programs that we have statewide, they'll be able to go to our website, figure out which program they're interested in, and know a good majority about what to expect from that program and what they need to do to volunteer. So your website is going to be the key portal that you need to make sure has your volunteer application, the job descriptions, the time commitments, trainings that are coming up, contact people, the liaison, you got to be on there. So make sure your online presence on your individual agency websites are there, and they're thorough and they're transparent. Your social media, I'm not a huge social media person, so this is probably not the best person to talk about it. But depending on how your agency works, you may have one agency Facebook page, you may have a Facebook page for each program, however it works. I know here personally we have one Facebook page for the agency, and it's run by a couple people, so we send any post that we want to an individual and then they post it for us. So I don't have access to our social media accounts. I just kind of put together what I want to say and then they put it up very quickly. I've never had any issues and really works well getting all of our stuff on our social media. So posting regularly helps a lot. We're working on a campaign to highlight volunteers every week. So if you can do something for your program, either highlight a volunteer, highlight staff, highlight programs that you're doing, see if a client wants a spotlight to put a testimonial up, anything that you can do that way in terms of social media is going to be helpful. LinkedIn is a new one that has really kind of come up more and more, that you can post jobs on LinkedIn, but you can also post volunteer opportunities on LinkedIn if you have a LinkedIn account. So same thing with Twitter and all of those other ones. There's a lot of online matching, volunteer matching sites, so like Volunteer Match. There's a whole bunch listed here on the screen. I will let you know that All for Good is a site that is advocated for by Volunteer Tennessee, so it's one that they really support, and it's free. So the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability has a login for All for Good, and we can post all of our trainings and volunteer opportunities on there at free of cost. You can do that as well. There's others that I'm not sure exactly how much it would cost or what the fees are, but you have your Hands-On Network. So in Tennessee, it's Hands-On Nashville. Even though it is Hands-On Nashville, they do volunteer opportunities across the state, so it's not just focused in Middle Tennessee. Create the Good, I haven't looked into this one, but it's linked heavily to AARP, so they have the older adult base, so that may be something that we want to look more into. And of course, you see all the other ones that I'll do more research on and try and get some more information about. But there are those online matching services for volunteers that you can post your opportunities and people can kind of come to you for those. So this is going to be the portion where I asked you all kind of what you guys are doing in terms of volunteer recruitment. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that right now, and I wasn't able to do it on the first recording either, but hopefully I will ask you all that in February. So I'm really excited. So that was the end of our kind of volunteer recruitment strategies presentation. And now I'm really excited to announce a project that I'm working on across the state, and hopefully you all are going to be interested in participating in this. But I am launching the 2020 volunteer campaign here at the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability. And the goal of this project is by the end of 2020, we have at least 2,020 volunteers to represent all 10 statewide programs that we have that are housed at the Commission on Aging and Disability. And those 10 programs are the Collaborative Response to Elder and Vulnerable Adult Abuse, or the CREVA program, Dementia Capable, Guardianship, Ombudsman, My Ride Tennessee, the Volunteer Transportation Service, Nutrition, Meals on Wheels, things like that, home delivered meals, as well as congregate meals, Stay Active and Independent for Life, a SAIL program, Senior Centers, the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, or SHIP, and Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program. So these are the 10 programs that we're kind of focused on right now. If you have additional programs that you'd like to share with us and how your volunteer have a volunteer component that you're recruiting for that you'd like us to add to this list, I'm happy to do it. So what is the purpose and the reasoning behind this program? Is we really have no central data system on how to track the number of volunteers we have that assist with the services that our programs provide. So it's really, I'd like to show the value of having a more centralized data system to be able to analyze all the data from all of the programs. So some of the benefits for having this is you can find the in-kind monetary contributions, and I'll talk more about that here in a minute, I believe. You can demonstrate to funders the needs and successes of your programs. So we'd love to do this, but we need more capacity, so it's capacity building, and with 20 more volunteers, we'll be able to do this future project. We can promote the programs across the state for all volunteer programs, not just individual ones, but we'll have statewide coverage of all of them. Planning and developing current and future projects, providing data to more effectively recruit, manage, and retain volunteers. So this will help us be able to say, for just, 3 or 5 hours a month, you can impact so many people's lives, that kind of data. And identifying any gaps we have in volunteer demographics that may need to be filled across the state. So those are just a few ways that this could be beneficial. So implementing, I'm going to be working with all state, regional, local, county, whoever, anybody, staff, to report and track volunteer data. So I do want to assure you all that how you are currently reporting data is not going to change. So I'm not going to be changing the formatting. I'm not changing any kind of databases or anything like that you're already reporting in. The only thing I'm just going to ask for the number of volunteers you have and what the number of volunteer activity hours that they have. So I may have a couple follow-up clarification questions but I'm hoping it's not going to be adding more work to your plate. So I'm hoping that these webinars are going to help with communication, education, relationship building, and collecting feedback to strengthen all the programs. And I hope you're going to join more of the webinars and give me another chance to have less technical issues. So this year, in 2020, I'm really going to focus on tracking the number of volunteers each program has, the number of individual volunteers, and the total volunteer activity hours that they have. And this activity hours could mean anything. It could mean admin work, it could mean training hours, it could mean doing presentations, programs at the senior centers, hours of delivering meals or providing rides, whatever that is. It's any kind of activity hour. So I'm not sure if you all know this or not, but one volunteer hour in Tennessee is valued at $22.67. That's specifically in the state of Tennessee. Nationally, it is $25.43. So if you're applying for a Tennessee-specific grant and they need in-kind matching hours, every hour you have for your program is worth $22.67. If you're going for a national grant, federal grant, or a grant that covers more than just Tennessee, you can use that national number. So our elected officials and our supervisors and even the public like to have kind of a monetary tie to our programs. So it's really going to show the impact that we're going to have on the community by getting all this data in one location. So to promote the program, what we're starting, and we actually started yesterday, January 20th, is we've started the Make a Difference Monday social media campaign. So we're asking individuals, well, first of all, Make a Difference Monday is going to highlight an individual volunteer and their story. So we'll ask them to complete the form that you see on the screen, and I've also attached to the email that I sent you. So complete and sign the form, and we also ask them to submit a photo of themselves so we can get a face to the story. It'd be great if we could get a photo of them doing the volunteer activity. So, they're driving, maybe not with the client, but they're driving to pick up a client, they're delivering a meal, they're counseling someone, they're visiting someone in the nursing home, something along those lines. Or it can be a selfie, it's kind of whatever the volunteer wants. But their photo and their story is going to be posted on the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disabilities Facebook page every Monday. As of last Friday, we had 3 submissions. Now I believe we're up to 4. So we do have about a month's worth of promotion for this campaign. We would love to represent all 10 programs. So right now we have one program that's really got a lot of submissions. So we're hoping we can sprinkle in multiple programs and it not just be one program heavy. And like I mentioned before, we're working on updating our database, or excuse me, not database, our website for all programs. So it's not completely updated yet, and I hope I can show you guys in February kind of what we're doing in terms of that to help with recruitment. So what we're going to do on the TCAD, or Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disabilities website, is we're going to have a volunteer opportunities homepage where all 10 programs are going to have, a 2 to 3 sentences brief description of each program, and then it can be linked to an individual volunteer opportunities page for that program. On that individual page for that program, you're going to see kind of a more in-depth overview. You're going to have your application, your role descriptions, any kind of manuals you have, who can volunteer, who can't, who do you need to contact, pictures, videos, kind of anything that we can put to help promote the program is going to be on that individual page. So when the person looks and says, I'm interested in volunteering for the Ombudsman program, they're going to be able to click that Ombudsman page and get a good idea of what their duties and responsibilities are. So when they reach out to their local or regional ombudsman, they're going to already have in mind what's expected of them, and hopefully they'll be around longer. Additionally, on the home page, we're going to add a volunteer interest form to where we're going to ask for the basic contact information of a potential volunteer, and then they can check off as many programs that they're interested in volunteering for, and that will come to me, and I'll keep a list, and also I'll send those individual inquiries to any of the program staff that we have, not only at the state level, so all the state staff will know kind of what volunteers are going down, to the regional, local, city, whatever level we need to get them down to. So we're really hoping that'll be a good recruitment source for all of our programs. And once that is completely up and functioning, we will send it out and we'll kind of get your input on it and hopefully get you some more volunteers that way as well. So when we reach our goal of at least 2,020 volunteers by the end of 2020, what we're going to do is the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability, my agency, is going to host a volunteer recognition luncheon in each of the 9 area Agency on Aging and Disability regions. So we're going to do 1 volunteer luncheon in each of the 9 regions, so 9 across the state. The luncheon will be at least approximately 2 hours long, so maybe like an 11 to 1 or 11:30 to 1:30 type of a deal, to where we'll provide lunch, and we'll also have a program. So hopefully our executive director, Jim Schulman, will be able to come. If he's not able to come to all 9, we can ask one of our commission members to speak. The area agency on aging and disability director would be invited to speak. Any elected officials would be invited, as well as the volunteers themselves. So we're hoping to get at least 1 volunteer from each program to give a 2 to 3 minute speech and kind of share their story of why they volunteer and what volunteering for their program means to them. So we will create the invitation for each recognition event once they're scheduled, and we would ask that you invite your volunteers to that event. We'd also invite the local media outlets, like we talked a little bit earlier about, to hopefully get some media coverage to share the impact on the community for all of the programs. And we also are hoping to form a partnership with First Lady Marie Lee's office and invite her to speak at each event. Again, kudos to Keita Cole for her Volunteer Expo event. I'm kind of stealing her idea. Stealing is a strong word. I'm not reinventing the wheel. Sorry, I should probably get Keita's permission to be able to do that. But if she's not able to attend, maybe she'd be willing to record a short video like she did for Keita and their Volunteer Expo. So this luncheon will be free. It's not going to be any expense to any of your volunteer programs. Like I said, my agency, the Commission on Aging and Disability, is going to host and pay for this event in all 9 regions. So what I'm asking of you all to help make this project a success, it is going to truly be a statewide effort. This is not going to be more reliant on one program than another. It's going to be kind of, we're all in this together type of a thing. So we are going to look to all state, regional, county, and local programs to report your number of volunteers and activity hours to me monthly. I know, I'm hoping that's not going to be a huge ask. Just shoot me an email and kind of let me know your numbers. Other reporting options can be discussed. Monthly is highly recommended just so we can have a good estimate on how many volunteers we have, and that way we can start to plan those volunteer recognition events earlier in the year. We want to avoid the fall at all possible to help with the SHIP program during Medicare open enrollment. So I'm hoping between July, August, and September is when we can do these recognition events. But I'm not going to be able to do that unless we know how many volunteers we have across the state. So that's why monthly is highly recommended and preferred if you can report your numbers. Also, if you could be patient with me for follow-up questions regarding data collection, as well as patient with me with technical issues on webinars. Participate in the webinars. Give me another chance next month to do better with technology, please. Ask your volunteers to complete the Make a Difference Monday participant form to give them a chance to be recognized. That's a huge retention strategy, is to recognize the volunteers, letting them know you appreciate them. Share the volunteer recognition event invitation with your volunteers once those are created and scheduled. Nominate a volunteer in your area to speak for your program. So start thinking about that in the back of your mind, is who do you want to represent our program at these recognition events? I know we're going to do the recognition events. I'm confident that we have everything that we need, just have to have the proof behind it. And then lastly, be open to any additional requests that we might have as ideas come about to improve and expand on this project. I do really appreciate everyone's cooperation. I hope this is not going to be additional work. If it is additional work, hopefully it's very minimal with just one extra email a month. If it is too much, please let's talk and see how we can make this less burdensome to you. So lastly, I just kind of wanted to give everyone the references and resources that I used during this presentation. So I took the Centers for Nonprofit Management Volunteer Management Certificate series a couple years ago, and that's where I got the format for the volunteer role descriptions. Here's a few books that are really great with Volunteer Management 101, Volunteer Recruitment Book, The Complete Idiot's Guide for Recruiting and Managing Volunteers. It sounds like a silly book, but it's actually really good. 365 Ideas for Recruiting, Retaining, Motivating, and Rewarding Your Volunteers is great. And you also have links to the Commission's Facebook page, which we already have our first volunteer for Make a Difference Monday that was highlighted yesterday. And then we have our volunteer opportunities page that you can look at. Again, it's still being updated. Not all programs are listed on there. So bear with me while we get that updated. We're going to have that fully, I'm hoping, functional no later than February 11th, because that is our commission meeting. And I'm hoping to be able to share this with the commission with our updated website. So our next webinar is going to be Friday, February 21st at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. And we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins of volunteer recruitment. So I hope you all can join us then. This is where I would normally ask if you have any questions. And here is my contact information. So please feel free to email me or call me if you'd like to discuss anything. Email is probably going to be the fastest way to communicate with me. I am in and out of the office quite a bit, so we may want to start with an email and schedule a call just to make sure we're not playing phone tag. But thank you all so much for listening, and I look forward to talking to you all next month. I hope you have a great rest of the day.